Welcome to the next episode of the Emerging Workplace Leaders podcast. Today we'll be talking to Kat Parsons, an incredible woman who's driving change in the FM industry with her passion for diversity inclusion. Kat Parsons works for ISS as Head of Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging for the UK and Ireland. Let's dive into this inspiring conversation together.
Welcome everyone to the Emerging Workplace Leaders podcast. I'm your host Sophie, and today I'm joined by Kat Parsons from ISS. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm really excited to be here today. We're also at ISS and this place is amazing. I love it. As soon as I walked in, I just said how much there's such a great culture here. You can just tell.
It certainly is. It's a beautiful office. Everyone is very welcome.
Yeah.
All right.
It's really nice. But first, I thought I'd introduce you by introducing you.
Okay.
And telling you a bit about you.
And go for it. Okay.
So, here's a little brief overview of Kat for all the listeners out there. So you graduated from Lancaster University with a degree in environmental science in 2006. And your first role after university was as a graduate environmentalist. You then moved to this is so long, by the way, just think about now. You moved to the Arcadis Group from Virtual as a Service Leader, Program Manager. And then you worked at SLR Consulting till 2020. And during this time, you were also the chair of governors of St Pancras Catholic Primary School. We're not even halfway yet. You then moved to ISS in 2020 as HSEQ Operations and Environment Manager. Then you went to be head of HSEQ Professional Services and Technology. You then transitioned in 2022 to the role you're in today as Head of Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging for the UK and Ireland at ISS.
Correct.
And we're not finished yet. And then beyond that, you've also had many notable achievements, including creating loads of campaigns around diversity and inclusion, whether that's been about Pride, Black History Month, Women's Men Days, Movember, just so much. And you've also developed an ISS Menopause Awareness Project, which has won awards. How many awards is it? The 2 awards. Yep. So the ROSPAR Award.
The ROSPAR Award.
The ROSPAR Award. And also the ISS Apple Award. And you've also been shortlisted for Inspiring Women in H&S Award. And not only that, you've also been featured in the Hive Top 75 D&I Leads in EMEA and also on the Women to Watch list. And you've also just consistently been an advocate for LGBTQI plus rights and promoting inclusivity and equality in the workplace.
Yeah.
That's insane.
It's quite a long list, isn't it, when you look at it like that?
That is amazing. And what really interests me the most is how you went from finishing uni and going from an environmentalist to now being transitioned into the role you're in today.
Yep. So
tell me a bit about yourself.
So you've covered all the highlights. So I decided when I went to uni, I didn't want to be sort of stuck in a job that was just sort of in front of a laptop all the time. I wanted to be out and about, and I looked at prospectus, and there was people in rivers with waders on and all sorts. I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be outside. So I did a degree at Lancaster. I absolutely loved it. Did 3 years there, and then in between, I did a few work experience bits and pieces in the summer, just free, just to go and get a bit of experience in office. I got offered a job before I'd even graduated, so I'm headed back down south to Ipswich again, and then that's where I stayed for a couple of years. And as part of that, I was out on site all the time in a van with rigger boots and a hard hat on. I absolutely loved it. I was all over the country 5 days a week. And it sort of came to coming into the office a bit more. I realised actually I was very good at project management, program management. I could, anything that was last minute, a nightmare client, I absolutely love. If there's someone who's a pain who just causes issues, I'm like, right, I can fix that. That's no issue. So then I think that was sort of realised that it was useful for me to be around in the office more than just bombing around in a van. And then I had my kids, and then, so I decided I was going to sort of be in more. But my focus then moved across into more of a health and safety role. So I worked on a lot of the oil and gas sites. So if something went wrong, something's really going to go wrong if you drill through the wrong thing.
Attention listeners, let's take a break for a second. The Emerging Workplace Leaders podcast is brought to you today in support of the Young Leaders of the Year Award, sponsored by Bowden Group. Ready to be recognised as a leader? This is your chance. Apply today with your 1,500 word submission to emergingworkplaceleaders@outlook.com.
I like the health and safety side, and it worked out a bit of a game in terms of health and safety. It was a bit of a dry subject, but like if something's not working or you think, oh, this doesn't feel quite right, that was sort of me saying, right, well, let's play the game. You report that to me. I'll go and fix it because you reported it as a health and safety issue.
So you like to fix things?
I love to fix things.
You like to fix things,
yeah.
Which is probably what you're doing in your role.
Absolutely, yeah. So that was sort of the part of the move across. I came across the facilities management from that environmental world. I knew nothing about facilities management.
Trust me, it's a game.
There's a lot to know. I went to my interview and I was like, I literally was Googling up, like, what is facilities management? So I knew I could capture the health and safety side, and I knew I could do that networking piece and build those teams together. But yeah, what FMN was, not a clue. But they took a punt. I joined 3 years ago, and then 18 months ago I was asked to move across to a brand new role, diversity inclusion lead, which I initially said no to because I didn't think I was competent to do it. I thought I was a one-trick pony with doing the menopause piece of work. So I initially turned my boss down and said, no, I can't do that. And then she said, you will be doing it. And then I basically got everyone on. Everyone was like, you could do this, So maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome, I don't know. But yeah, since then I literally have not looked back.
So when you went into uni and you did your degree in sciences, did you find, going into like an environmentalist role, it's very much like about changing the future.
Correct.
And even though like you're doing a role which is far from what you were doing back then, You're still doing something with kind of a similar meaning behind it.
Is that sort of sustainability piece? Yeah. But my old job was to regenerate sites that were derelict into, new build sites fit for purpose. And now my role is to almost take those sites that have been created with people in them and make sure that they're sustainable for people to come in and reach their full potential in their role they're in.
Oh, that's amazing how it links together. So how did that transition come around from you being in your previous role?
HSEQ role.
Yeah, your HSEQ role to then transitioning into your new role now.
So again, I think because I health and safety, you're around people all the time. My job was to go out on sites, meet all these spaces, find out what was happening, have a good poke around to see what needed fixing. So I already had, a massive network that I'd already developed anyway. So when I came to this diversity role, it just meant that I already knew where the talent was. I knew what was happening on sites. I had that sort of finger on a pulse. So I knew what needed actioning and when.
So you knew better than somebody actually just coming in specifically for that role. You'd already kind of understood ISS as a business.
Yeah.
And you kind of knew what they needed.
Yeah.
That's way more valuable than it would ever be to just bring
someone in and
do that.
Yeah.
And this is what you need to do for a tick box exercise.
Absolutely.
It's given them the opportunity to have somebody who's seen it from an employee point of view.
Yeah. And for me, it was really interesting as well because in terms of my background in construction, that sort of environmental piece, it was very male dominated and the diversity was non-existent. So for me to come across into FM and I was wondering around my word, the diversity in this business is just vast, from generations and age, from culture, from LGBT, it's so diverse that it was almost quite sort of intimidating when I first joined because I'm used to working with white men called John, Luke or Simon.
So you find that quite challenging when you were working in construction?
I think I got used to it. I did it for 16 years. So I always say about sort of coding and shaping yourself into what fits per site. So if I put rigger boots on, I walk completely differently. I'm strutting myself around site. I used to say I have a bit of a, like an elevator pitch, when you sort of speed date.
Yeah.
When I used to come into the site cabin and you see them going, oh no, they've sent a woman. I had to do this sort of the traffic was, this morning, that kind of so that I was like, oh yeah, massive. I need to sort of go, I'm saying this, all right, I'm not going to cause any issues. I'm here to do my job. I hope you do your job, but don't mess around. I'm not some sort of weak female that's arrived on site. So I think actually when I then came across, and when I was offered this diversity role, my whole background has been in these sort of, you must demonstrate hard skills. You must be good at project management, finance, commercials, all these things. And I said at the time to my boss, I was like, I'm not a fluffy person. Diversity seems really fluffy, and I think that's one of my biggest regrets is this is absolutely not a fluffy role. This is the hardest role I've done because
I can imagine.
There's so much focus in so many different areas to make people feel that they are included in the business. That is a challenge, and it takes a lot of work and from a lot of people to get that over the line, so people feel that when they come into a building like this.
And that's something that I was going to ask you about later in this podcast is about how you can actually, we want to talk about it now, but it's something I've been quite passionate about, but how you can take actual action rather than just talking about diversity.
Absolutely.
Because it's generally, I think a lot of people just talk about but don't actually do anything.
It's like I say, people just send it to a tick box, yes, I've got a policy.
Yeah.
It's on an intranet somewhere or SharePoint. And then if they're not actually living and breathing it, then what was the point in doing it?
What would you say to potentially, like, when you were younger, maybe you had to push yourself into that facade of being this, the guy, as opposed you had to be on that scene? What would you do now if you were in the position of being the diversity leader for that company?
That's really good. I would probably be a completely different person. Again, just like the situation you're in, like the toilets, for example, were always like there was male and female toilets, but it was always like the storeroom or the special toilet.
Yeah,
it was not designed for women to be on site at all. And the PPE I used to wear, the crotch used to be around my ankle. Somewhere it was, you were sort of wading around site in oversized. It's just, by the time I was, early 20s, so 24, 25 when I was, bombing around on site. But, I would absolutely not put up with that now. And if that happened in our business now, I'd want people to come and say to me, this is not right. This is not fit for purpose.
Would you ever see yourself in the future going back to that industry to kind of make some of the changes that you've seen? I mean, I don't know what it's like now, but
I don't think it's come on. I think it's come on. I think that it has changed. And when I first joined ISS, and they were telling about these ERGs, and I was like, "What is an ERG?" And I had to nod on for ages. And I was googling, "What's an ERG?" There's all this random stuff coming up, and I had no idea what they were talking about because I'd never heard of an employee resource group in the construction industry. So, I mean, now I've moved out. I think actually there's a lot of people that have seen my move across into diversity, and then they've almost gone, oh, actually, we probably should have been doing more than we were doing. Yeah. And now there's like women's groups being set up and menopause groups and all those sorts of things retrospectively, and I'm not in those businesses, but I still have a foot in the door in terms of construction. I'm an engineer in terms of background, so I do tend to talk at construction events and stuff because again, it links in with facilities,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So,
Facilities management is definitely a bit about, but it's just massive.
It's absolutely huge. It's so diverse.
If somebody always asks me about, like, what is facilities management, I'm like, it's just too complicated to explain. Just everything in a building. And then I just kind of end the conversation there because I don't really know how to explain it. But talking about menopause, this is the first thing I wanted to talk to you about because obviously it's been quite a big, that project was a very big point for you in your career so far, in your role. So I've got a few questions.
Go for it.
So first of all, tell me a bit about the project.
Okay, so the project was, I was in my health and safety role at the time. Obviously, we have a duty of care to our people. And at the time, my wife, who is a wonderful woman called Fee, was at home with me, really not like, there was anxiety, depression. She's really data-driven. So we get to the end of the day and I'd be like, I've had a great day. It's been fantastic. And I'd be like, how's your day? She'd be like, awful, like head on the desk. Like, I've not, she's not achieved. She's like an absolute perfectionist, which I'm not quite sure when we married, but it works. Absolutely. After sort of, tests and bits and pieces, I mean, she was having weird sort of kaleidoscope migraines, and we ended up getting scanned and stuff to make sure she didn't have a brain tumour. She was having issues with her bowels, and I was like, she's got bowel cancer. Like, and I'm not a hypochondriac at all. Like, we never go to the doctors for anything, but I was convinced that there was something wrong with her. And then it turned out, after a bit of research, she was perimenopausal. And there's like 60 different symptoms of the menopause. And I knew absolutely nothing about this at all. And neither did she at the age of 47 at the time. So I sort of was dealing with that, helping support her at home. So, she'd be up in the night, I'd be up in the night. So I was almost sort of taking that into work because it was affecting me. And then I was looking around the business at like 57% women, and like no one was saying anything about the menopause or struggling, or there'd be a lot of people that would disappear out of meetings because it had been a bit hot and stuff, and no one had said anything. So I was did a bit of poking around and was like, there's no menopause policy, no one literally talks about this. So it's only in that health and safety role I was going around some sites and stuff, and I said, talking about my wife being menopausal, and it was literally like this sort of golden key. As soon as I said it, they were like, oh my god, like I can't sleep, my feet are too cold, like I'm hot sweats, I'm this. Like, you get like this verbal diarrhea of like the symptoms. So I was like, okay, well, if that only took me saying about my experience with my wife for them to do that to me and be, very open about, vaginal dryness and all sorts. I got like literally this whole list of symptoms and sex drives and all sorts of stuff. So I was like, well, we haven't even got a policy. So that was my first thing, was to get a policy pulled together. So I worked with our HR P&C team, and said, this is what we needed to do. I then pulled together, I was in health and safety, so a toolbox talk. So I did one for what is the menopause, like really simply. And then I did one for, like, as a line manager, what can you actually do? So yes, you can give someone a desk fan, but that's not good enough in my eyes. Yeah. There needs to be more about that in terms of flexible working, the facilities you provide on site. If someone's flooded on the way into work, you need to make sure that you've got provision for them, that they could just get sorted and then they can carry on with their day without impacting the rest of the day. So that's sort of where it came from. And then it went absolutely like off the scale. I was doing lunchtime webinars, and this was during COVID. And so you'd see sort of the screen of faces as I was presenting. And actually there was quite a good mix of men on there. It was probably about 50-50 with men on there as well. Amazing. Which I was quite surprised. But then all of a sudden you saw a second person join all of these men and all of their wives, because it was over lunchtime. But like, what are you watching in there? So these wives are coming in, like always sort of digging them in the ribs saying, like, listen to this, because I need support too. Yeah. So it went wider than that. And, people were talking to me about the fact they've been to, family weddings, and as a guy, they walk over to a table of women and they were all sort of talking about the menopause. And this guy was like, oh, you talk about the menopause? I've learned about this at work. So he'd join in a conversation with his cousins about the menopause because he'd heard about it and what we'd been doing.
Because it can be quite a subject which a lot of people just don't talk about, so shy away from.
Yeah, and now you can walk around this office and everyone who is menopausal will happily tell you all about their symptoms. With the bad. And it's wonderful. And this is like senior people in the business. Again, we're going out to sites and saying, how are things, how are you finding things? And, and they also get a verbal download of, of what they're experiencing. But that's allowed us, to have that, create that sort of environment where people can talk about the menopause. It means that we're now talking about prostate cancer, we're talking about suicide, we're talking about all sorts of subjects, because people are now in that headspace to go, it's actually, I can talk about this.
So how have you helped create that open dialogue between employees in the workplace to make it quite an open space?
I think, so my message when I took my role on was about being vulnerable. And I talk about a lot of really, taboo subjects, that I've experienced, because then that gives someone else that space to go, do you know what, actually I've experienced that as well. So almost instead of me relying on someone else telling me, I'm getting there first and saying, right, here you go, this is all of my baggage, this is what I'm experiencing, feel free to share. So that's the message that went across the senior leadership team. And again, that's why now when, managing directors go to site and, they get all of this sort of, if you ask, how are you? You used to get, I'm all right, but now you get, well, actually, I'm on this treatment and this, and I'm having whatever, and my wife's and my husband, and it's sort of filtering through the business.
And that's so important, isn't it? But it's like completely changing the way people have worked for such a long time, especially in like a corporate world. I feel like I'm like Jen said, millennial generation, but like we're very like that anyway. But speaking to leaders who might be baby boomers,
absolutely,
getting it through to them must be so challenging.
So for me at ISS, and I always was told this, you're pushing on an open door, and they needed basically the glue to hold all the good stuff they were doing together, because there was pockets of stuff that was amazing before I came into position, but it just wasn't visible. So for me coming in and saying, look, glue that together, this is what we need to be doing in the direction we need to be, we'll attract new talent to the business, we'll retain the people that are in there. But yeah, I've not actually found it as difficult as I thought I would.
Okay.
The pockets I have, with the sort of, the sort of senior male leaders, some of them are a bit like, I don't understand this gender balance. I just hire the best person for the role. After, a little one-to-one safe space, tell me what you're thinking, and I can then educate you on why that is. I'd be in little huddles in, different meeting rooms with senior men in the business. And then at the end they go, oh, okay then, no, that makes more sense, okay. When you look at their SLT and they're all exactly the same as them, you've got no diversity of thought, you've got this. So once you presented it, they were then going off to their SLT saying, do you know what, I had this great idea after talking to me. We need to diversify what we're doing here. So
it's about educating.
Absolutely.
It's about educating the leadership team. That's really interesting. And I got a few more questions here about the Menopause Awareness Project. So how crucial do you think it is that team leaders, especially like leading diverse teams of, especially this is for the young leaders, the year award, these are young leaders, but how important is it that they should be discussing these topics in the workplace? Just wanted a bit of an emphasis on it, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely critical. And again, a lot of our leaders in the business are the younger generation, looking after older people in their teams. And again, one of the bits of feedback when I was going around to one of the sites to talk about this. There was an older woman, probably mid-50s, who said, my line manager's like 30. I don't want to have to go and talk to this guy about all these things I'm experiencing. He's not going to understand. One, he is, because it's no different if you'd gone and said, I'm having cancer treatment, or I'm having, mental health issues. There's no difference between what you're asking support for. It's labelled the menopause, but it's everything that comes with that. Yes, there's that flexibility around your working, but again, it's back to that duty of care for my health and safety background. That line manager needs to know how to get the best out of that employee and provide that support, and that it doesn't matter what that comes from, whether it be menopause or anything.
What steps do you think you could advise for a leader, not just young leaders, but any leaders to talk about these subjects which maybe class in society as once having been taboo? What advice would you give them?
I would say educate yourself. But first of all, my absolute tagline in the business is respect before understanding. So if someone comes up to you and says, I'm experiencing the menopause and I'm really struggling, you may not understand what that means, but give them the time and space they need to offload. Don't try and fix all their problems in one go without sort of knowing what you're talking about. But, give them that space to be able to say, this is what I need, this is what the support is I need. And they might not know what support they need. They might just need to sort of make you aware. And then you can go off and, go and do your research, go and ask others in the business. And if there's a gap, like the menopause was here, then flag that there is a gap. And if you've got that capacity, then go and fix it yourself.
That's so true. That's such good advice as well. And it's just from what you said, it's just validating people's feelings.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, as might have actually been a challenge for you, I don't know, early in your career, is trying to fix things all the time.
Yeah.
How have you dealt with that, being a fixer and then getting into a role where you've got to validate people's feelings, where sometimes you actually can't fix situations?
That's it's a really tricky one. And again, naturally, I'm massively a people pleaser. And yes, if there's a situation then I do want to go and throw everything at it to get it fixed. So it is challenging. But again, I think some of that is around, again, giving people space to air what they're struggling with, what their experiences are. And something we've been doing that's really nice here is we do these sort of brunch events with our CEO and a couple of our C-suite. And we'll invite 30 people from a key demographic. So we've done one on gender balance, we've done one on culture, race and ethnicity, we've got one on abilities coming up. And it allows those 30 people to directly talk to the C-suite to say, this is my experience of working in this business. So it's not being told, to their manager, up to me, and then I then pass it up. It's literally directly to our CEO, Liz Benison. And, the stories that have come out of those spaces, again, from Liz being vulnerable, saying, this is my perspective, this is my experience from my career, relating that sort of allyship piece, to then hear, people being squared up to in the language that's being used and, all these experiences people have had, maybe not in ISS, but in general, again, we can't fix all of those things. And I come up with a massive to-do list of all these.
And I bet that can become
like that, right, I'll fix it myself. The list gets longer and longer, and yes, they can't fix them all. So there is that priority piece. But again, that space gives that person that, right, I have told the most senior person in the business, this is what I've experienced, and make them aware.
And that's amazing that they feel so confident to be able to have their own conversations.
Yeah.
Which leads me on to the next area, which is about embracing D&I and how companies can do that a bit more. So first of all, I'd like to ask you a bit about the challenges that you face since taking on this new role, and anything that you may have come up against and thought, I don't know how to deal with this.
I think the challenge is not having enough hours in the day. It's definitely a challenge. There's so much that you can focus on, and for ISS, we have sort of 5 major dimensions of diversity, and me being me, I launched all 5 at once and then added military unity on because I like to do everything 100 miles an hour. So, once I got all of those groups set up and there was, the right people that had the same level of passion that I did that could drive this forward, that actually took the load off me and meant I could think more sort of strategically because they were doing the sort of the bits that they needed to focus on. There's a massive piece again around that sort of intersectional piece. So they're not all going off and doing their own individual things in their own swim lanes. They're all in the same swimming pool. They all know what they're all doing in their own lanes, and then they link up together. So the challenge is it's a never-ending list of things to do. So I never get to the end of a day and go, great, I've got to the end of that, because then more has come on the bottom of it. So
what's your end goal?
That's a very good question. I think it's, I don't know if I even have an end goal. I think it just goes, and there's just so much to do. And again, the amount that's happened in 12 months, when I was asked to sort of look at my 5-year plan, we could be in an absolutely amazing place in 5 years as a business.
That's so exciting. Probably leading the way as well.
Yeah,
I would say so. And like challenges that some companies may face, such as having some of the senior leadership not listening to their ideas about how you can incorporate more diversity into the workplace, about more inclusion, I'd say. What advice would you give them to overcome some of them challenges?
That's a good one as well. I think, again, the reason I was given the job I was given is because I went rogue. And I always say to people, if you find a gap, it's that sort of see it, sort it mentality. I found a gap and I wanted to fill it instead of just going, we haven't got this policy. We wouldn't have a policy now if I hadn't have, pushed it. And again, pushing on an open door, it was done quite quickly. But my advice would be, shout, don't just, carry on as is. And again, the culture of business is very different again from being in construction to being in FM now. It is in a very different world. But, having stepped back into that world again, if I did into construction, I think I would be shouting pretty loudly to get the change that I felt was needed. So I'd encourage everyone to go rogue and shout really loudly.
So do you think you would have inevitably been in this like role?
I think so, yeah. I think, again, as part of your career path, I was always, sort of, you have to tick certain boxes. And I always felt like I was sort of being pushed down a little bit. I'm a really ambitious person and, I had a plan and then it got twisted because of the diversity role. But, you're not quite technical enough or, you need to work on your report writing. The amount of other skills that I had that I could bring to the business. But, report writing was the one that was sort of being, I don't have to write, well, I'm a senior leader in a business, so I need to get it. It was just being a bit ridiculous. So, yes, I should have left the industry longer, previously before I did to make the move, but I think it ended up being sort of.
It was linked.
Yeah, like it was, yeah. Yeah.
And what roles can employees take in supporting the workplace? And not the leaders. What can employees do? I
think if you don't have an employee network already, shout about starting one and then join those, because the amount of traction that happens from those groups, again, it's sort of like you're that own little sort of army of what happens in the business, and it's very different to being in a head office. We don't see everything every day, and yes, I get out as much as I possibly can, but I'm not there every day 5 days a week to sort of witness what's happening.
Cool.
So again, to club those people together to get that voice of yes, we've got a parental leave policy, but is it flexible? Well, actually, from evidence, no, it's not flexible enough. And that's something that we're working on at the minute. So, you need to buddy people together so that they have that collective voice to push back on the business to give them, give me the direction that I need of what we need to focus on next.
That's so true. And I think, it all goes back to that being just open communication.
Absolutely.
And it's really interesting. Oh, it's time for a quick fire round. I'm so excited for this.
Oh, no.
I actually think I'm really excited.
So I'm water both.
Right, so we're going to be doing a quick fire round now. So the previous few guests have found this way too easy, so I've turned up the heat a bit, gone a bit more complex with the questions. I presume you're quite competitive as
always. Yeah, always.
So we'll see. Right, I need a timer with 30 seconds.
No.
So you've got 30 seconds to answer each question. And by the way, this is really funny when it's in the edit because I've got the countdown. Yeah, it's a clock. That's quite intense. Quite intense, isn't it? Right, so you've got 30 seconds to answer each question. It's a quick fire round, and I'll press go. I'll ask the question and then press go. So my 30 seconds won't be included. My question won't be included. So, are you ready?
Okay.
So it's time for quick fire round. Each guest has 30 seconds to answer each question. There's 5 questions. Let's see what they can answer in 30 seconds. How do you stay motivated and inspired in your role as a leader?
I would say I am fed off of not only what I see from all the sites and all the employees are going to see, but equally what my counterpart in other companies are doing. So if someone's doing something amazing over in another area, I'm like, how did you do that? And again, this space is so collaborative that I can basically go over and say, how did you do that? What worked? What didn't work? So I think I'm more inspired by other people that I work with to then make the change in the business.
Amazing. And you had 4 seconds left. So that was the easiest one. It only gets harder from you. How do you engage senior leadership and gain their support for diversity and inclusion initiatives?
Well, I create spaces. So I will deliver to them as a collective, as an SLT, and there's about 58 of them. And then I basically pin them down one by one. And I will say, right, what are you comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with? And then I'll push them in a direction that they're not comfortable with, because it's get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that works really well.
You're really good at this. That was like 10 seconds, and that was really interesting. I like that you pin them down and challenge them. Brilliant. I don't know, I'm not trying to try that one now. I feel like it down. How do you balance the need for immediate action with the importance of long-term cultural change and diversity and inclusion efforts?
Love that. So I would say it's about speedboats and tankers. A speedboat is something that you can just toolbox talk, you can update, you can do a webinar, you can do those quick sort of education pieces. Tankers are the ones that are the big cultural change pieces. So if you're going to do a change of process or a change of policy, it's not just a case of just changing a bit of paper. You need to do the whole package around it, and that's the one that takes longer. So lots of speedboats, get a couple of tankers going.
You've definitely rehearsed. You've got your answers, because that was so good. Like,
Just comes out my mouth.
Analogy and everything ready.
Just comes out my mouth.
What is one key lesson you have learned from your experience as a leader in the field of diversity and inclusion?
Oh, I would say, sorry, what was the first bit of the question?
One key lesson.
One key lesson is it's hard to switch off is the lesson that I have learned in this. And it's the importance of switching off, because it's literally 24/7. So I'm very conscious of my own mental well-being and making sure that I'm logged off at a certain time so that I'm refreshed, because this can just be all consuming.
Definitely. I suppose sometimes you might feel like you're playing a lot of accounts.
Yeah.
Which can be quite challenging.
And it just...
Do you get therapy?
I go, shoot.
We should have therapy. And this was meant to be my question to throw you, but I don't think it will now anyway, because you've already seen them. But how's your all-female design build project going?
It's going really well. We are now at the point of just having our planning application approved, but the concept is it's an all-female design team and an all-female build team. It's a shack of a house that we've done a bit of work on, and now we're ripping the side off and doing a 2-story extension with a big renovation with an all-female team.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see that. We'll even look to say that. We'll make sure to have a look to do hand on the screen.
Perfect.
So that's a quick fire round finished, and the questions clearly still work. You answered them all amazingly. So the next section is a bit more about recognizing and addressing hidden stereotypes. So as I said to you before we started recording today, I didn't know which kind of route to go down, because there's so much we could talk about. But one thing that I thought was really important was to talk about stigmas and things that people might not even realise that they do in a daily basis, potentially the workplace, outside of the workplace, and how you can change your mindset and help change people's mindsets around what they say and the actions that they take, because sometimes it's this unconscious bias.
Absolutely.
And how do you make that change?
So, we've launched an unconscious bias module, but that is a desk-based, you give them examples and bits and pieces, and that's fine, that's mandatory across the organisation. So you've given everyone a bit of a sort of a sort of step in that journey. Something that we have also launched is diversity heroes. So it's a bit like a safety hero, but a diversity version. And we're training them again on that unconscious bias, but that sort of microaggressions as well. Because it might be that you don't even realise that you've got that bias. And I think some people have had pushback saying, I haven't got any bias, I'm completely aware. Absolutely, no, you're not. It'll be in there, it'll be, from your upbringing. And you'll carry that through with you. So I think sometimes it's allowing people to sort of, someone else to take you to one side and say, do you know what, actually, do you see what you did there? So it's even things like in meetings. I've had it before where, if I've asked a question, I've had, half an answer has been given to me. But if my male counterpart has asked a question, they've been given the full attention and the full, that's a really great idea, blah, blah, blah. What should have happened is someone should have taken that person aside and say, that's exactly what Kat said.
Yeah. And made that obvious. Do you know what, actually? It reminds me of something quite personal to me, as I went through quite a few mental health issues when I was younger. Yeah. And one thing people used to say to me when I was ill was, think about how worse off other people have it in life. Mm-hmm. And I was really ill, and I remember when people said that to me, I used to get really angry because I used to think you just don't understand. And I took it really angered me. But then one day I just turned and I thought to myself instead, actually, they're really lucky they've never had to feel any mental health issues. And it's actually, yes, there needs to be an education around it, but how lucky that they don't even realise that it's not something you can necessarily control.
Absolutely.
And I think people can get really wound up about it. Yeah. And it's such a good way to look at it is, how nice is it that you just don't even recognise it? But then there's also such a downfall to unconscious bias as well. It's definitely, that's not across the board with diversity and inclusion. But for mental health, that's something that I've always found to really help me and to remove any anger.
That's a good idea. And again, I think sometimes if people, like you say, if they haven't experienced that sort of mental strain, they have absolutely no idea. And, from an outside point of view, but that looks great. And you're always, smiling and you're always this, but, it's in there, isn't it? And again, it gets you and it does drag you down. But I think once someone has experienced that with a partner or someone in their family or themselves, it's just oh, right. It's not about, cheer up.
And you're aware about what to say.
Yeah.
So do you think a lot of the unconscious bias is just generally down to a lack of education of different diverse?
I think, probably it is. And again, from my background, being in a very white, middle-aged, dominant industry, I didn't know anything about different religions, different cultures, different, anything. It was literally just white men or white women. There's quite a few women that were coming into the industry. So again, that was my breadth of diversity. So again, it was, I had my own biases, unconscious biases when I came into this role. And I was very much okay, I naturally lean towards gender balance. I naturally lean towards LGBTQIA+. I naturally, go towards, generations because it encompasses sort of parenting and everything else. But in terms of that sort of culture, the religion, that sort of bit, was completely outside of my comfort zone. So again, even I had to challenge myself to say, right, I need to, yes, I can do this, and this is what I feel comfortable with, but I need to now go and focus on these areas here, abilities, for example, as well.
And expand your education.
Absolutely.
Do you think it's the responsibility of the employer or the employee to educate?
That's a good question. I think it's definitely two-way.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely two-way. And again, if you're in a management position and someone comes up to you and says, I'm dyslexic, for example, then you need to make sure that you're putting the alterations in place for that person. And one size never fits all. There's no silver bullet for anything that you put in place. So again, in terms of toolbox talks, for example, I always create these really nice, fancy toolbox talks. They've got loads of colour and they're really engaging. But for a neurodiverse person, that's like a car crash of, I can't pick up anything, So, it's making sure that if you're putting the information out, then put it out in multiple different ways, I suppose, so that someone if they'll relate to it, even if it's a generational piece, or, the language, could be anything.
Oh, that was a good answer. It's such an interesting topic, and also, do you think that the unconscious bias will always be an issue, or do you think as time goes on?
I think it'll always be there. I think people hold it, and again, if you don't address it, then it'll continue until someone calls it out, or you then realise it yourself and think, actually, I need to readjust. Readjust how I'm thinking about these things.
This is the bit which I just really am really interested in asking you about. So, moving beyond the buzzword of diversity, what does diversity even mean anymore? Everybody's using it, throwing it around the place. I actually personally prefer inclusion now, because I think it's just including everyone. Yeah. Whereas everybody's diversity. As much as people scream and shout about it, what's the action people can actually take now?
That's perfect. So I am in complete agreement. So in terms of that diversity piece, as a position in the business, I can say, right, I want more female engineers. So we'll get more women in engineering in, and we'll tick a box. But if you don't have that inclusion piece, you've not created the culture, you've not created the process and everything else you need to nurture that person, that woman coming into the business, you'll lose them in 6 to 12 months if you're lucky. So you've wasted all of that time and effort of onboarding someone for them to go, this is not a place I want to be. I don't feel like...
Oh, it's a tick box.
Exactly. So that diversity plus that inclusion, that's the bit where you feel like, right, I belong in this business. And so that's the way the magic happens. So yes, I have scope over this diversity piece and I can put metrics and all sorts of stuff in. But my aim is that inclusion piece, and that is the bit that is the goal that you need to get people to stay in the business for that belonging piece.
I do feel like people are listening and understanding that inclusion is the area of the magic, I suppose, compared to just shouting and screaming, we're a diverse company and this is what we do for diversity. But what advice would you give to leaders who are looking to take like concrete action rather than just talking about it?
I think it can be really overwhelming. Like we've said, diversity is absolutely massive. So almost pick what you want to focus on first. So yes, get your networks and things sorted out because they can start, talking and giving you the information that you need on where they think you should be focusing. But if you've got a gender split issue like the construction industry that I used to work in, focus on that. If it's, about the type of people that you want to get into the business, focus on those things and make sure that you include those people as part of the process. So we want to put a new policy in for parental leave. You're a parent in the business. What does that look like? How does that work for you? But
involve
them.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I can get to the end of something and go, that's brilliant, like gold star. And then someone comes on and goes, what? That's nothing to do with me. So again, I always talk about the paternity policy. When I had my kids, I had to use the paternity policy because the company didn't have a parental leave policy. So the paper said he, him, all over it. And I was like, well, that's not me. And me now would have been like, no, thanks very much. That's not fit for purpose. That's not me. But at the time, I just happily was like,
even things like adoption leave as well.
Yeah.
Like that's something which I've got a friend who's adopting, and she gets like the same amount as giving birth. You have to be honest and say that's the difference. And I do think that was amazing. Yeah. And I don't know, is that something that all companies do?
I think a lot of them are starting to get on the same wavelength because, again, it's exactly the same thing. Yes, okay, you haven't carried that child, same as I didn't carry my kids, but you have that time that you need to bond and get into routine and all the car crash that happens with, trying to balance work and kids and everything else. So, yeah, why should you not have the same?
And men as well are never given that much leave at all in a lot of places, and that's quite... Well, that's something it's been like that for years.
Yeah.
And I think, it's so important that it changes to be a parental policy rather than being maternity.
Absolutely. And again, that sort of vulnerability piece as well. If I'm on a meeting and it gets to sort of like 3:30, 4 o'clock, I'm like, right, I've got to stop now. I need to pick my kids up. So I will verbalise that I'm not going to be, logged on until 7 o'clock. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I need to go and pick my kids up for that period of time. And then if you bring me after 4 o'clock, there'll probably be a child in the background doing something or other. But that's accepted, that's fine. And there's a guy, one of our account directors, Pete, used to be on calls as well. And it's the same thing. He'd be like, right, hard stop now. I need to go pick my daughter up. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant. As a guy, setting that tone, he's a leader in the business to the rest of his team that he was on. I'm afraid I'll be back in half an hour. I need to pick my daughter up.
And that's really important, isn't it? Is it like you don't just say you're going to do these actions, you don't just say these things about your company as a leader, but you actually action them yourself.
Correct.
Because if you put in a parental policy for men where men can take a month off leave, but actually because that's never been the case before, and they had maybe had a child a couple of years before where they could only get 2 weeks, and now they can get 3 months.
Yeah.
If that leader doesn't take that time off, what kind of example are they setting to the rest of their team?
And again, the world isn't going to end if someone takes, a couple of months off work to spend that time supporting their partner, who's, and again, it's a massive time of your life, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, take it.
Definitely.
And if people weren't taking it, I'd be asking questions why they weren't taking it.
What's your hopes for the future? Not just at ISS, but in the workplace?
That's a really good question. I think from my background of not feeling like I was included in the business, for really having to fight to get into the position I wanted to be in, to reach my full potential, to now where I feel like I'm absolutely flying, like that's what I'm aiming for. Everyone should feel like that. And again, in terms of like ISS, our employee value proposition is be who you are, become what you want, and be part of something bigger. I'm absolutely who I am. I've worked my way through the business to a position that I'm really happy with, and I'm part of something absolutely massive. In terms of facilities management, we have over 500 clients across UK and Ireland. So not only is what I'm doing here in this building now that goes out to our sites, which goes out to our client sites. So that spread is massive, and we're a global organisation as well. So our best practice, I push back up to global and say, look, this is what we're doing in UK and Ireland. This is fantastic. You should do it. And then it gets spread globally. So world domination.
I think like one thing actually which would be really interesting for like leaders is what action can they take like today? What's one thing they can do today after listening to this to help support and foster a more inclusive environment?
I would say be vulnerable is my number one. So my lovely example of this from recently is I went and did a talk at a client site, and I was given blind questions beforehand, questions beforehand so I couldn't prep. And one of the questions was from a woman who wanted to talk about menopause. But she'd asked this question and it said, do not say my name, like completely keep me anonymous. But by what I talked about in the panel, I was talking about fibroids and bits and pieces and how the menopause looked. That woman at the end, in front of 60 people, put her hand up and she asked her question. So from going, do not say my name and be anonymous, she was then loud and proud to have the conversation because I had been vulnerable. So my absolute advice would be, have a look at what's happening in your business, listen to your people, but equally share your vulnerability, because that will unlock everyone else to do exactly the same.
And that's amazing. I love that. Unlock your own vulnerability.
Yeah.
That should be the title for this podcast. And just to finish off, so talk about the Young Leaders of the Year award. You've won quite a few awards, to be modest. You've won loads, and I just wanted to ask you, like, what kind of impact has all them awards had on your career now?
Massive impact. And I think when the Rossborough Award came, that was the first one for the Menopause Project. I'd bounced the idea around the office about putting this Menopause Project forward for this initiative, because it was no one else was doing it. It was health and safety, and I was like, we could really win this. And they were like, let's give it another 12 months. Let's not put it in. And I was like middle management kind of class line. Do you know what? I'm going to put it in.
Good for you.
So after everyone else had said, I'll give it a bit longer, I'm not quite sure, like the fact that we won was absolutely massive. And that was like that springboard. And I was like, actually, you need to stop listening to what other people have to say. If you think it's good enough, then put it in. And again, the other awards have been fantastic. And again, that's then led up to, head of D&I award for the Diva magazine, which was completely unexpected. And I didn't prepare a speech. I literally burst into tears and had to stand on stage and it was amazing. But, yes, I have doors unlocked all over the place now. And again, if I need time with people to talk about, an issue that I'm having, then I get that airtime, and it allows me to, take that learning back and improve the business.
That's amazing. So I would say that from that, it's a really good thing for people to know, especially that young leaders, is sometimes, even if people around you don't listen to the people and just go
have confidence in yourself. If you think that what you've done is good enough, or you want to put yourself forward for something, then self-nomination is not to be frowned upon. Put yourself forward, because actually, don't rely on everyone else to do it. Why would you rely on others?
Yeah.
Put yourself in, and again, you'll be surprised what shortlists and stuff you get on. And again, even the impact of being on a shortlist, everyone will go, "Oh, you're one to watch," and that's
how you end up on a women to watch list.
That's like, yeah. Yeah.
Well, have you got anything else you'd like to add?
I don't know. I think we've covered loads then.
Yeah, we've covered loads. Thank you so much for today. I've just enjoyed listening to you. We've covered so many different subjects, but it's been so interesting. I actually wouldn't have wanted it any other way. I've just really enjoyed listening to you and seeing what you're putting into action here, and being that driving force and inspiration for others in this sector, and probably and beyond that. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
And so thanks so much, guys. So if you're considering applying for the Young Leaders of the Year award, just do it.
Just do it.
Kat's told you. And we'll be back next time for our next episode. And thank you very much. I'll speak to you next time.
And that concludes our incredible conversation with Kat Parsons, an incredible leader in the FM industry supporting the future of diversity and inclusion in the sector.
What do you think?